Now let's discuss the concept of de-dollarization that's really buzzing these days. And several countries, including China, Russia, and BRICS nations such as Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are all ramping up their efforts to use local currencies for international trade and reducing the dependence on the US dollar. Now, several countries are also reportedly working to create a new reserve currency to replace the US dollar. Remember, the US dollar is the dominant currency in the world economy right now when it comes to foreign exchange reserves and international trade as well. And now several countries want to get their own local currencies in. The final agreement on this is expected to come up by August, when the member countries, the BRICS countries, will meet for an annual summit in South Africa. So let's now discuss whether de-dollarization is inevitable or whether we could see it in the next few years to come. To discuss this further, we have a currency expert joining us on the broadcast, Anindya Banerjee, who's the Vice President of Currency at Kotak Securities. Thanks very much, Mr. Banerjee, for joining us. So recently, the signs that we are seeing, China calling for suppliers to accept payments in yuan. Then on the other side, you had Russia ordering other countries to pay for gas in rubles. So are all of these signals, are all of these steps that we are seeing, all leading up to de-dollarization? Do you think that could be a reality soon?
Thank you for having me. Yes, actually there has been a lot of activity around this the country is wanting to internationalize their own currencies, including India. Now we have to understand this concept of why dollar remains the dominant reserve currency in the world. The reason being that America allows unfettered access to its capital market. So it has almost very little restrictions as far as if a private citizen or if a central bank wants to acquire the US assets, and that plays a huge role. Now, yes, we will see every other country in the world trying to push their own currency in the international sphere. And we will see some limited success in that. But in order to unseat the US dollar, basically the solution has to come from any country in the world which has that kind of a deep and liquid capital markets, and which allows other countries to access its capital markets in an unfettered way. Why this matters? Because, see, trade and capital flows are two sides of this coin. So this is a very controversial subject, and there are a lot of misconceptions, in my opinion, around this subject. So trade and capital flows. So the reason a country runs a major current account surplus. So current account surplus just not includes trade surplus. They include the other kinds of things as well. For example, on your royalty payments, etc., on remittances, etc. So when a country runs a current account surplus, it basically means it doesn't have adequate demand within its economy to suffice its need. So it means it is producing more than what it can actually service. So it needs to export.
Right,
so
and interesting that you point out there that while there's been a lot of talk about de-dollarization and countries, of course, ramping up their efforts, how practical is it, given that dollar has dominated the global trade for the last 8 decades, ever since the Bretton Woods agreement was signed? And if we talk about the dollar's weight in the global forex reserves, according to data, that's currently around 60%. So 60% of the global forex reserves are in dollars. So that just tells you how important the greenback is and how much the dependence of global economies is on the dollar. So considering all of those facts, is it really practical for us to de-dollarize the global economy and to trade in local currencies in the near future, in let's say the medium term?
So, for as I was saying, for any country to replace the US dollar with its own currency, it has to basically follow the prescription of America, which means it needs to run that kind of billions of dollars of trade deficit and current account deficit. Now, no country in the world is willing to do that. If you look at China, if you look at the countries in Middle East, if you look at Russia, or in fact, the entire emerging markets, no country in the world is wanting to run a massive trade and current account deficit. Without running a massive trade and current account deficit, you cannot internationalize your currency to a level where it can unseat the US dollar. And then comes the whole aspect of having deep and liquid capital markets. The rule of law is followed where it is acceptable at a global level. So each country is making a huge progress. For example, India, with a very stable currency, is seeing its currency internationalized at a transaction level. But for it to become a store of value, because you talked about the FX reserves, the foreign exchange reserves. So that is a most important barometer. So, for example, Saudi Arabia may trade with China in yuan. So Saudi may supply the crude oil to China and get paid in yuan. But it's unlikely they will hold on to those yuan. They will convert it into US dollars and invest in US Treasury. So basically, yuan is then becoming just a pass-through currency. So that won't unseat the US dollar. The day we see the countries are able to invest directly into some emerging market country, currency and its assets, that is the day we can say the dollar has a threat.
Right, that's very interesting. So, if countries want to get their local currencies to in any way replace the US dollar, there will have to be a cost that they will have to pay. So, that's interesting to know. Thanks very much, Mr. Banerjee, for joining us.